I love television, and I love watching John Hockenberry. And he's just about the best interviewer I've ever heard from, watched, listened to. Only he's going to just regale us and talk to us about life. John.
Well, I've never been in a group of people more obsessed about chairs, except when I was in the hospital about 20 years ago. 450 bucks and it has wheels. Boy, when did you people land? But this is it. This is the bottom. This is the bottom moment of the TED conference because I mean, Jerry Laybourne says she is from television, but I'm from Dateline. I'm really from TV. This is the sewer hole of the media right now, and I'm it, and I'm here to represent it. I'm kind of the mud-spattered pickup truck of the information age, and the words "wash me" are kind of written on it there. And so I'd like to talk to you about technology, and of course, you know, I have to follow Bergman. Thanks. Thanks, Ricky. You know, I would like to talk to you about technology. I'd like to talk to you about storytelling. I'd like to talk to you about some of the people who are here. I mean, you learn so much at the TED conference. You have to love a conference where on the first day, you know, somebody asks with bated breath whether this is indeed the end of the von Neumann architecture era, and somebody else talks about dinosaur sex. And another person refers to the genocide in Rwanda as a phase transition point on the way to a higher evolutionary plane of human existence. That'd go over big on Nightline. Oh, yeah. I was very pleased to learn today, though, that Jerry Laybourne got involved with ABC Disney because she wanted to get back in touch with people from Canada in television. I didn't know that. And the other great thing about being among people in, you know, technology and information is that, you know, you're involved with that collegial spirit of camaraderie, of people working together, real team players who love each other dearly. I was talking to Alexander Tsiaris, who's going to do the Body Voyage presentation on Saturday, about how moved I was by John Warnock's pictures of Vesalius's dissections. And Alexander immediately replied, "Oh, he's just a 2D poser." So that spirit of camaraderie, that spirit of working together is something we really love here. I mean, you got to feel sorry for Daniel Boorstin. I mean, he's an incredibly profound, brilliant man, but he didn't really understand why people were laughing at the line about the bureaucrats who say, never do anything for the first time. I mean, this crowd knows that that's Microsoft's corporate, you know, motto. And so that's why they were laughing, but I don't know if Boorstin knew that. As I said, I'm John Hockenberry. I work for Dateline, and I get at the airport at Monterey, and I immediately get into a car from General Motors. The GM guys picked me up at the airport. They immediately wanted to take me out to the turbine car. I said, no, thanks. That's okay. That's fine. I came to Dateline after that particular experience. But I do work for NBC Dateline, and I was pleased to hear Steve Case's remarks yesterday, and I'd like to tell him that if he wants advice on how to keep from becoming a wasteland, you know, I'd be happy to work for America Online as a consultant. But I actually think that Steve Case has come up with some terrific innovations on the wasteland concept all by himself without any help from television, and things that we would never have even thought of. I mean, who could have imagined what junk mail would look like alive on screen? But seriously, the only advice I would really give to Steve Case is to not take a lot of programming advice from the FCC. Not a good idea. Not a terribly good idea. Although I was checking the wires before I came in here, and you know, Deng Xiaoping, who died this week, he'd been out of power, out of the power structure in China for 7 years, and it turned out he was attempting to check his email on AOL. The State Department, though, working with all kinds of technology that I don't even know about, you probably know about, and hopefully it's not going to affect the rest of us, but they managed to download Deng Xiaoping's email, and all it was a bunch of flames from Taiwan. So It was kind of hard for me to get to be a presenter here because Ricky was worried that my chair wasn't high-tech enough up on this stage. And I want to talk about high-tech and technology and falling in love with the technology, because I think that that's the mistake that we make in the world where we really are trying to present stories. We really are trying to make one-on-one contact if we are artists, if we are storytellers. And it is so easy to get in love with the technology. And in fact, much of the history of science and the history of technology and the history of message and media on this planet is the story of how we fall in love and then out of love with technology. And I want to show some, I'll give some examples of that. As I said, I work for NBC Dateline, but I also work for MSNBC. I have a show on MSNBC called Edgewise. And MSNBC, of course, is the joint venture between Microsoft and General Electric, NBC. And the fact that I work for MSNBC possibly explains why I was asked to show a photo ID to pick up my badge when I registered here at the TED conference. And MSNBC, maybe a lot of you don't know about MSNBC, and that's part of its charm. MSNBC is actually pioneering a technology that is really on the cutting edge. It's called non-expert systems. And this is a program whereby people who know absolutely nothing about what they're talking about go on and on and on for a long period of time. And there are actually people who will be on this stage who were MSNBC contributors, and I'll let them give you the experience firsthand. But I actually had to take a week or so off to come here to the TED conference, and the people at Dateline wanted to know a little bit about what I was doing here, and whether it would be a story, and they said, well, explain to me a little bit about this TED conference, who is TED? And I said, well, I said it's about technology and design and technology and issues of vision and the media and that sort of thing. And they said, well, could you book this TED before 60 Minutes gets him? We'd be interested in that. And I said, well, I would try, but I don't know if that's going to be possible. And they said, well, tell us more about the people at the conference. And I said, well, these are entrepreneurs, they're visionaries, these are people who work in the technology field and who have done groundbreaking work in all fields. And of course, there was absolutely no interest in that. And it actually reminded me that I pitched some stories about some of you people to Dateline over the years. I pitched, for example, most recently Todd Machover's Brain Opera, I pitched as a story for Dateline until I realized and was told by the seniors at Dateline that it contained the two most serious toxins that story did on primetime television, brain and opera. And so that was a no-go. So they said to me, well, look, maybe the angle is what do all these people have in common? What do a lot of these people have in common? Maybe that's the angle we should look at. And so I said, well, actually, a lot of the people here got where they are today because they were really good working with Unix. And Dateline said, well, we could be interested in that. That could work for us. Ricky didn't announce this, but Nicholas Negroponte's new book that I don't think it's been announced anywhere yet is going on sale here at TED. It's going to be shipped here in the next couple of hours. It's, of course, a more groundbreaking visionary statement. And in this case, the book just removes all the filters and gets down to his basic philosophy about the future. It's going to be called Being Nicholas. One more point about MSNBC. We were contacted fairly early on after MSNBC went on the air, and by Nicholas, and we were very excited about the fact that the Media Lab might be very involved with MSNBC. And what it turned out was that he wanted to hire Soledad O'Brien and begin to breed a super race. And I always knew that was really what was behind Nicholas Negroponte, but seriously, I'm from television. I'm not going to spend my entire time up here taking cheap shots. But I will make one more. I will do one more. MSNBC is a collaboration with Microsoft and GE. And if this isn't an interesting meeting of cultures, corporate cultures. In the beginning, Gates definitely wanted this collaboration to be about vision, to be about the future. And GE immediately, of course, turned it into a discussion of how many people it takes to change a light bulb, which is something that they're very, very good at. And what they discovered immediately was that Microsoft had a lot of people working on this problem. And they actually had a special group working on an upgrade that would actually involve the emitting of light as a feature. And that the discussions almost fell apart over that, but eventually they got it back together again. And what we're talking about with MSNBC is actually, and quite seriously, an attempt to grapple with the problem of how to deal with content in a situation where technology is very much involved with people's lives, where channels and audiences are fractioning the kind of mass audience paradigm and the mass audience economics that has been really with the media for most of its existence, particularly in the United States and as far as global investment in media is concerned. It's completely changing, it's completely fracturing. And the investment profile for a lot of your ventures is based on the notion of tapping into the mass audience. And I want to tell you about how this notion of tapping into the mass audience and this notion of using technology to do so takes you away from the very sentiments that were so powerful this morning with Jackie's storytelling, which were the very elements that were so powerful about Peter Bergsman's presentation, one-on-one storytelling. And I think what we can say about technology and about the computer's movement into people's lives is that as it becomes more ubiquitous, it begins to increase the value of those things that exclude it, that don't involve the computer. So time away from the computer becomes more valuable as the computer moves into our lives. And the question then is, will those times away from the computer, and will leisure time in general, involve traditional media, traditional storytelling, or will it involve hybrid, the computer and technology, or will it involve hybrids of technology and storytelling? And of course the answer is both in some way, but there is a way of strategizing and thinking about this that I want to present to you. And the question really boils down to, is the computer like the television, or is the computer like the telephone? And this is something I'm sure many of you have thought of. And of course the answer is both, and the answer is we don't really know yet. And there's urgency to this problem because at this particular moment economically in the history of the world, and particularly in America, leisure time is declining. This is the commodity where media and storytellers harvest their goods. The notion that people have leisure time to do the kinds of things that involve theater and art and the presentation of stories. And if leisure time is declining, or at least it doesn't appear to be declining at Microsoft, where they can spend a lot of time thinking about dinosaur sex. But I think with leisure time declining, there's a certain urgency to this problem. So MSNBC had a problem to go on the air with a news channel that was designed not to be on in the foreground, that was not to be something that people sit down, stop what they're doing, and watch. To design a news channel and an information platform that can be on in the background and that can deliver its programming in the background. Now you begin to talk like that, and advertisers go, oh, wait a minute, what do you mean the background? Well, you have to say to them, well, it'll be on the foreground, but, you know, it'll just look like it's in the background. But it's really the foreground. And kind of reminds you of push technology, doesn't it? You know, it's really the foreground, but it's kind of the background. The key is that as we attempt to expand the kinds of programming, where is the revenue stream? I mean, many of you are asked this by your bankers, you know, every Monday morning. And I would say there are two kinds of technologies when we categorize television versus telephone. There are infrastructural kinds of technologies, technologies that aid in your life, the kinds of things that you would be doing anyway, that enhance them, that make them easier or better, technology that is kind of in the background. And then there is sort of, you know, traditional media technology, television, radio, publishing to a certain extent. And what you can say about media technologies is that their moment of greatest economic success, their mass audience, their gigantic mega profits, occurs when there's the greatest amount of romanticism about the technology. When that moment is gone, the audience fractions out into tiny little slices. And that is essentially your entrepreneurialism has to shift to those slices, and if it doesn't, you're dead, you're finished. For most of the existence of television, it has been predicated on the notion that, wow, they're alive up there on the moon. Look at that. The novelty of the technology drove the mass audience together to experience the event. We are at the end of that moment. And the audiences for television are declining. For traditional television, for traditional everybody watching at the same time television is declining. So the storytelling paradigms go away. The revenue streams go away. They're completely changed. I mean, part of what the O.J. trial says is that, did you see the Bronco? Okay, did you see the Bronco? Did you see the Bronco? Okay, great, great. We can talk about something together. That's what it's about as much as it is about prurient sort of issues of tabloid television. Don't forget, it's a moment that everyone can talk about in common. At a moment when people are cycling and orbiting away from that alleged American fireside chat room that FDR created in the early part of this century. Now, on the other hand, so in the romantic notion of television, the novelty of television goes away, so does the audience. And you have to think a different way of dealing with it. Now, infrastructural technology is very different. Very different. When you love the telephone, where are you? When you stand in line to see it, where are you? You're at the World's Fair, is where you are. You're at the World's Fair. And you're going, hey, that's great! Wow! No one owns telephones at this moment. The people who make telephones at this moment are going, oh God, Jesus Christ, I hope people buy this shit, man, because I don't know what's going to happen. You know. But everyone's standing in line at the World's Fair going, that's great! Now, the moment that the telephone company becomes massively successful is the moment when people take telephones and go, fuck you. The moment the auto industry becomes massively successful is the moment that the cars start killing us. In fact, per unit, the number of accidents in America has risen exactly proportionally to the profits of the auto industries in the United States and around the world. And that's not just a function of more people driving. The more the cars kill us, the more we use them. The more the technology is something we don't care about, if it's infrastructural, the more we use it. Take the computer. Now, I actually, until, what's his name, Brown, was up here yesterday throwing those little micro gadgets on the floor and trying to get you all to go because he knows how expensive they are, and there's probably at least 4 people here who also know how expensive they are. I had actually thought of what I might do is take a laptop computer and just dump it on the floor and hear what the response would be, because that is a test of whether we are in the moment of computers, I don't care about them, or the moment of computers, they're great, this sort of World's Fair moment. It's just passing with computers. And I figure about half of the audience would kind of go, oh, God, what a drag for him. You know, that's terrible. And the other half of the audience would kind of go, so that moment is passing. And the question is, are people going to love their computers like at the World's Fair, which would be Kai's presentation, okay? Or are they going to hate their computers and just kind of bang on them? And if computers are infrastructural technology or media technology, there are billions of dollars riding on how it comes out. And you have to know about that, and you have to think about that. So, I'll just let you think about it. Do I know the answer? No, I work for Dateline. What do I know? But I will say one thing. And I think this is reflected in the behavior of people who log into news services. And is the problem of coming up with an online news service that MSNBC has had, and that CNN has had, and that MSN has had, in trying to figure out why people come here, what do they want to do? Now, they want to interact with each other, they want to check their email, but what do they want to do as far as news is concerned? My email reflects this, and I think it's borne out of the initial research of what goes on when people log in. They check in to make sure that the world hasn't ended. They're cruising around doing anything, and they check CNN to say, well, it happened, okay, all right, I can go away now. Now, think about your experience with the media. And And think about how important it is for people to be able to log in somewhere and know that they're kind of connected, to have that sort of point where they, okay, this is the background noise, this is what's actually going on. If there's something was screwed up here, there'd be something really wrong with the world. And this relates to the issues that Patty was talking about yesterday about the software agents that custom design things around your interests. It's kind of create a digital cocoon around you that relates to what you want and only you want. People aren't necessarily reassured if they're surrounded by a cocoon of people telling them, just sit there, that's fine, everything's fine, you're okay, here, you like this, here, you like this, this is what you like, you know. People aren't necessarily reassured by that. So, because think about in the 60s. If you were in the 60s and the television suddenly went blank, you would immediately think, oh my God, the Russians have bombed us. If in the 80s the same thing happened, you'd go, oh, I bet the cable system's fucked up. Now, if that happens on your video card, on your Sony or whatever workstation, and the television suddenly goes blank, you don't even call. You just assume it's your system crashing. Which means the world could actually end, and you wouldn't know it. So the value of going to a news area online is diminished by the number of filters that are between you and that notion where you say, honey, I think the Russians bombed. You know, you want to be able to instantly say that, and you want to be able to get that information quickly. Okay, last thing before we go. There's also the sort of human interface issue that's associated with kind of computer media. And I want to just demonstrate something here. And I want to bring up the issue of Slate, which, you know, is a laudable experiment, and they've done some terrific work on Slate. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and Kinsley will be here to talk about it. But, you know, Slate is a magazine, and it involves reading. It involves information on Slate, it involves graphics, and they got all that on Slate. But reading is this. Reading is like, you know, a lot of this goes on when you're reading, you know, a lot of this. None of this goes on. But what is this like? What is this like? Repetitive motion. You do it too much, you could go blind. You know, I think sometimes, I think that explains, you know, the attitude of people like John Barlow. I mean, spending way too much time alone. But I love John, dear friend of mine. He'll slide a knife in my back later. Now, finally, so here we are on this stage. And I'm sitting in this chair. But which is the coolest chair? I mean, this chair doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't do anything. Look at this chair. I mean, this chair's got wheels. It goes up, it goes down, it folds up. I mean, this is an advanced chair here. I love this chair. But if you for a moment confused the economics of this chair and who it's for with the economics of this chair and others like it and who it's for, you're on the street, folks. I love this chair for reasons that you have to understand to deliver messages to people in that chair. Sure, it's advanced. Sure, the technology is fabulous. But that's not what's going on here. It's my relationship. My grandmother turns 100 in March. She was born in 1897. She's lived through all this technology. She went to her first school on a horse. And I was talking to her recently about all this technology and all this stuff she's lived through. I said, Grandma, I mean, consider all the change, all the extraordinary things that have happened since you've been alive. I mean, so much change. Doesn't it just, like, freak you out, you know? And she looked at me and she says, oh, things haven't changed that much, Johnny. I mean, it seems like ever since you kids were born, you've been bringing me stuff and going, Grandma, look at what I got. And that's what's been going on pretty much for the last 80 years. Not too much is different. When the first photographers ventured out to the West Coast to take pictures of Native Americans, their response was, I don't want to have my picture taken because it takes a part of me away. And they were immediately dismissed as primitive, silly people, and of course we're overrun and their culture's wiped out. Today, if you attempt to post Michael Eisner's likeness with Donald Duck on your website, a lawyer will call you and make the exact same argument. Thank you very much.